The luxury watch industry, and specifically the Swiss watch industry, is a very small industry made up of a very tight network of very conservative, primarily old dudes making very conservative decisions. For the most part, that does actually give us great watches, but sometimes it does lead to some bad business decisions. I mean, why does Omega still insist on having a movement that is as thick as a brick? And why does Zenith still have substandard clasps on $10,000 watches? I think it's time we take a look at the watch industry as a whole and take a look at some of the things they're doing badly and could improve upon. Let's dive in. First up, Swiss made. I've talked about Swiss made many times. Recently, I made a video about this. I have never had so many silly bot and troll comments in my comment section. The top three were the person that stated nothing good comes out of Africa, referring to the fact that I am from South Africa. Then there was the how much is Rolex paying you, which I also got how much are the Chinese paying you. So it's not like there was a consensus on who I was shilling for. But my favorite of them all was there are too many mountains in Switzerland. You can clearly see there's no room for a factory of the size needed to make all those watches. I'll just let that one sit with you for just a moment because it's beautiful. But as I stated in the video, I don't really care where the components are made. And yes, the watch industry as a whole is a global one. Dials come from Thailand, they come from Taiwan, they come from Switzerland. Bracelets get made in China, they get made in Italy, they get made in Germany, and they get made in Switzerland. The fact is, quite a few brands get stuff built outside of Switzerland. Not all of them. That would be a false statement, but many do. As an example, on Hamilton's website, where they have the question, are Hamilton watches made in Switzerland? It's answered with, all Hamilton watches receive the Swiss watch certification. That's not answering the question. So honestly, although I personally don't care where something is made as long as it's good, I do care, as do others, about feeling lied to. It's a problem for the industry, probably more so in the watch nerd community. Regular buyers really don't know or care, I think. But location has in part become a proxy for quality, and when the location gets called into question, so does the quality to price relationship. For small brands, this could potentially turn into a challenge, but for more expensive brands, you could also turn it into an advantage. Swiss made used to be more strict. It was because of the brands pushing for a more lenient definition that we ended up where we are today. The brands were worried that they could not compete on price if they did not have the possibility to leverage international supply chains. I think you have to accept the following. Swatch Group definitely utilizes the opportunities to get 40% of a Tissot PRX produced somewhere other than Switzerland. If they didn't do that, that watch would cost more. And you could argue that they should just lower the price and accept a lower profit. But that's just not realistic. Last year, Swatch Group made 3% on the bottom line. They are not profit monsters. Swatch Group is struggling for a whole lot of reasons, but one of them is that the real profit monsters are not at this price point at any brand. It's the expensive watches that are most overpriced, not the cheapest ones. Right now, some brands have a really obtuse relationship with the concept of Swiss made. What if the brands opened the doors to even more regulatory scrutiny? What if we had more than one tier of Swiss made or reverted to a more stringent standard? Just like we have COSC and METAS, what if we had levels of Swissness? I can see that as a competitive advantage for any brand above $3,000. Below $3,000, I have my doubts whether it's consistently profitable, but I would be interested to see the industry address this credibility issue and turn it into a new advantage over time. Almost every company that sells any product is operating with some understanding of price points. Marketing and product people will work out what a reasonable quality and feature set for a watch should be at a given price point. So people expect COSC at $1,500 as an example, but not at $1,000. At $5,000, people expect ceramic bezels or something else. There's a reason an IWC Pilot Mark 20 costs $6,000, and Omega Seamaster Aquaterra costs $6,200, and a Breitling Top Time B31 costs $6,200-ish as well. They're all priced the same. They've got more or less the same qualities. They've got more or less the same feature set. There's a reason. The problem, though, with price points is that brands in part work their way back to production and try to optimize for profit. So, as an example, $1,500 may be where people expect COSC. But a company sees that they can make a movement with plastic parts that could be COSC certified. so they skimp on the components. Maybe they also choose to ditch the service and just chuck the movement when servicing the watch. That's cutting corners. Panerai have been caught several times cutting these kinds of corners. Unfinished base plates, selecting, only to finish visible components, all in the name of cost optimization. These optimization steps I can forgive at $500, but not when you are making luxury products. I also don't cut corners with my videos. I try to do my very best every time. If you're new here, that's hopefully the vibe you're getting. If so, click the subscribe button so you can get more videos whenever they release. Thanks. The price increases need to stop. It's fair enough, right? Raise prices to cover inflationary increases, but this race to premiumize without adding anything of extra value to the product has to end. JLC have been the poster boy for this, but they are nowhere near the only ones. Tudor is no longer a pure value brand. Omega is getting pricier compared to a few years ago. And the logic behind these price increases boils in a simplified fashion down to, in part, a belief that these products are in some ways Veblen goods where price increases could potentially lead to more demand. Also, it's a belief that in a market with a general decline in number of customers, the profit is at the higher price point, which will compensate for any drop-off of customers at the lower end of a brand's offerings. But nothing seems to indicate that this is working for any but a few brands. Honestly, it's Rolex, Patek, Jean, AP, handful of others that can pull this off sometimes. But any brands whose bread and butter is steel watches just isn't the case. Richemont is down, Swatch Group is down, LVMH is down. There are macroeconomic reasons for this, tariffs, China is in the dumps, but it's also because of pricing and specifically asking intelligent people to pay more tomorrow for the exact same product compared to what it costs today just isn't something people agree with. Land Dweller, PRX, Ingenieur, 12, Loco, Cubitus, Icon. I get it. People want integrated bracelet watches, so everybody wants one in their lineup. This happens to everything. There's a reason all running shoes these days are a mix of ultralight carbon inlay racing shoes like the Nike Alpha Flies, or they are chunky sofa plush thick Hoka style runners. Brands jump on trend, and that's okay. Apart from my pet peeve with pink, it's entirely understandable that brands follow trends. But there are two ways you can jump on trend. You can jump on trend with your own take, or you can converge on the middle. And by converging on the middle, I mean building something that is entirely in middle of the road. Something that's broadly appealing, that's as inoffensive to as many people as possible. Now, the Railmaster that was just released by Omega maybe is a trend watch, but it's just an Aquaterra with a different dial and brushed flanks. Compared to the Railmaster 57, it's lost any distinctiveness, and I think it makes it far less compelling. The JLC Polaris is also an example of a watch that is incredibly bland, or at least it was in the initial iterations. The new ones with the Fume, far more strong as products. There's no edge, there's no personality. It's just another black diver. Tudor too, the new 41mm Black Bay is a very nice watch, but they've moved away from the ruggedness, and they are also converging on this luxury diver space. The BB41 was different from a Submariner. It was different from a Seamaster 300M, and it's not anymore. Now it's just a middle-of-the-road luxury diver option. I think brands often sit looking at their watches and have the opportunity to go for something distinctive that set their product apart and something that conforms to what everybody else is doing. The latter is the safe bet, but I don't think it's the right one always. The aversion to just a little bit more risk in design is what moves the needle for customers. You have to give it to Rolex. The Dynapulse escapement is a huge thing. That's real innovation. You really have to be blinded with hatred for Rolex to not be willing to accept it. Tudor building a METAS-capable movement is a good thing, but especially for the big brands, and notably the ones from the three conglomerates, so Swatch, Richemont, LVMH, they feel, to me at least, like they're avoiding innovation in a lot of situations. Omega's movements need an update. They just do. Grand Seiko are also only now getting to a point where their bracelets are getting an upgrade. Yes, they've made some new movement innovations, so they're doing well, but there's still something there about, come on, keep up with the times. My own gut feeling is it's probably LVMH that's worst at this. They've been known for cutting corners aggressively on all other luxury products like leather goods, so I just wouldn't put it past them on their watch maisons as well. Hublot is still packing a Sellita SW200, I think it's a 200, in an $8,000 watch that doesn't have 100 meters of water resistance. I keep hearing stories about Zenith quality control on movements, and Tag have always been a brand that you could never quite pin down in terms of price to quality ratios. And it's 2025. Why isn't quick release bog standard on any watch above $3,000? This is another thing related to this thing about price points and cost optimization. But look at Christopher Ward and Formex and Chinese factory brands too. But if you can get a reasonably decent, easy adjust mechanism on a $350 watch, I don't really care what profit profile you have. You need to find a way to build it into your $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000, $15,000 luxury product. The independents seem to be consistently outperforming in terms of quality and features, and the big, primarily conglomerate brands seem almost paralyzed and just locked into talking about heritage without demonstrating that heritage in any notable way. Sticking with the big boys, specifically Swatch Group, set your brands free. Breguet, Harry Winston, Blancpain, Jacques Drouot, Rado, Junior Glashut, Mido, Certina. I'd argue that all of these brands are suffering under the shadow of the Swatch umbrella. Maybe Omega is too, but those brands seem so locked into a market position where they aren't allowed to think for themselves. Richemont and LVMH seem more to have found a formula that works. Swatch may have saved a lot of these brands years back, but right now I think Swatch is holding a large portion of their brands back. What do Venezianico, Anodain, Maine, and Christopher Ward and a whole lot of others have in common? They all have in common, as a part of their value proposition, some version of affordability for the price. 10 years ago, we made fun of Kickstarter-style brands that branded themselves as cutting out the middleman. Today, if I walk into a restaurant and the waiter says their food is affordable, I'm going to get a little bit nervous. Quality at affordable prices as a sales argument is something that has, to me, run its course. We all know that the baseline for quality these days is pretty damn high. Manufacturing is just that good. We all know that the price for that kind of quality is, relatively speaking, low. This was news 5 years ago, but not today. Today, using the argument of low price and high quality is almost a given for entry-level independence. It's a baseline expectation and not a differentiator. And I do think these kinds of brands would do well to transition away from those kinds of selling points. And the moment they want to do something extra special that costs more, they get stuck with the problem of having to explain how they're still affordable. I preheated a bag of frozen spring rolls in my oven the other day. And I suppose, in a sense, they were made in-house. I also have a pair of Ironheart pants, but if I write my name on them on the inside, does that make them in-house and no longer Ironhearts, but Mike's? I mean, this is no different from the multitude of brands that buy a movement from Sellita or get it sourced from Fleurier. They give it a round of extra polishing and then they call it the Caliber 075B as if they made it themselves. And they didn't. I dig what Breitling is doing at the moment, and the new B31 movement is super cool. And one of the things I like about them is they're still a little bit obtuse, but they're not calling the B31 in-house. They're calling it manufacture because it was made by AMT and they said they self-developed it. It's not the worst example, but it's a much better example than the other in-house BS that flies around every now and again. I'm really over the concept of in-house as any indicator of something necessarily by default being better as a result. I'm also irritated by the lack of openness. Casio just released their first mechanical watch, and it was actually pretty hard for me to figure out what movement was inside. And it turns out it's a Seiko NH35 movement. But they didn't tell anybody that, at least not in the press releases I could see. I don't know if this is one of the places where regulation would be in its place, but these marketing terms, just like free range and organic, mean nothing, and they just don't inspire trust. I prefer that the brands be honest and don't try to make their products seem like more than they really are. Limited editions, limited releases, drops, needs to stop. Just make your thing available. Trying to appeal to some fear of missing out is annoying, and the fact is, so many limited editions are easily available years later. Very few brands and watches are so popular that they can command that kind of label. And fair enough, a silver Snoopy, I'll accept it, but a Zenith triple calendar lapis lazuli dial, it doesn't need to be explicitly labeled as limited. It's a $22,000 watch from Zenith. I'd be surprised if they sell out of the 250 that they're going to build. I know the demographics of my audience. A lot of you are old farts, just like me. The watch nerd community is full of grumpy old men who feel things were better in the old days. And watch brands are really good at marketing towards people like me. Our brand has existed before the advent of color television. But our brand has existed before the steam engine. No, wait. Our brand has existed since the time of the pharaohs. And now, let's play some classical music and a little teeny tiny violin. A 21-year-old likely can't afford a Rolex. There's this belief that people buy their first real luxury watch when they start earning enough money to have real discretionary funds. So the marketing is targeted to people 30 and above. More importantly, it's targeted with a style and a tone that speaks to older people. And it doesn't resonate with younger people, and I think it alienates younger people so much that they never end up gravitating towards watches even when they turn 30. Stiff, dull videos of old people in white coats and business people in grey suits is just not a language that creates desire with a younger future customer. You don't have to hire a rapper. Not everything has to be an AP Alex or a Cactus Jack. But dragging out a 97-year-old Lenny Kravitz to sell JLC watches just isn't going to cut it. Tudor does to some extent succeed with this, but Omega is still dragging Daniel Craig around, and he hasn't made a Bond movie in 6 years. Daniel Craig is 57 years old, and unless Q supplies him with a watch that has a built-in rocket launcher, I'm not really sure he can pull off the whole spy thing. The younger generation doesn't connect with pure play prestige narratives that these brands rely on. They want community, they want authenticity, they talk about sustainability, and brands just don't talk to them. Those were 10 things I believe watch brands could improve upon. Hopefully I didn't come across as too critical. The fact is, I love watches and I want these brands to do as well as possible. So I expect more of them in the hopes that they do better and we can get consequently more and better watches. At the end of the day, that's good for us and for them. So what do you think brands could improve upon? Share in the comments. Like, subscribe. Cheers.